Welcome to Read This. I am your host, Alice James, and today we will be discussing Laws of Depravity with author Eriq LaSalle. Before we jump into the discussion, I would like to introduce you to some of the characters that you will hear about during the discussion. First is Degler, who is the serial killer in this novel. Quincy Kavanaugh, a New York City police detective who was abused by clergy as a child. Fee, also a New York City detective and Quincy's partner. FBI agent Janet Macklin. She and her former partner have been chasing Degler, the serial killer, for decades. Father Liam Kavanaugh, the brother of Quincy, who was also abused as a child. Alina, a grieving mother that lost her only son to suicide, supposedly. Also, Quincy's love interest. Noah Degler, the brother of the serial killer. Let's join the conversation about the characters hunting for a serial killer. Welcome to Read This. I am your host, Alice James, the host of Read This Author's Corner. And today we're going to have a wonderful discussion with actor, producer, director, and author Eriq LaSalle. We will be talking about the laws of depravity. Welcome, Eriq.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again, too. We have two very special panelists that have read this book and they are super excited to share their thoughts. We have Dale Caldwell. He is a man of faith and a thriller enthusiast. And we have Robin Pinckney, who is also a thriller enthusiast and a woman of faith. And me, who is no thriller enthusiast at all, a woman of faith. So I'm going to start off with just a couple of questions just to get us started and then let the conversation go where it goes. What did everyone think about the opening of the book? The first boom, in your face opening. The father wakes up and his sons are boiling him in oil. What was that?
Well, it set the tone for the book. It instantly started me to think of how did we get here? So that to me was the catalyst to say, okay, I have to go further, because how do you get to the point that you're ready to kill your father? So you knew it took a while. So it kind of put the key in ignition. We got started pretty fast. Didn't allow me to, taxi down the runway. We just went into first gear. So it jump started.
I liked it so much that, and I wanted to be fresh. So I replayed it, and this morning to really hear. And I love that, and love the beginning, because I got it when I first started, but coming back and really seeing that. And I love what you did with the prequel. That really was brilliant. It really was a great way to get it going.
And for me, who wasn't a thriller enthusiast, I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I could read this. I want to wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares. Maybe I'm not going to read this book, but I pressed on. Now, this is my last question, and then it's free for all. The first chapter, did anyone come to any kind of preconceived notions about Quincy when they read the first chapter?
Yeah. Well, I actually, and I love. First of all, Eriq, it's great to meet you. But your attention to detail, I appreciate acting. I'm a writer. I've written a number of books and so on. But your attention to detail is phenomenal, and you really kind of lead people down a path. And they make assumptions, as we made assumptions about Quincy that we learned, and we made other assumptions about people being good and weren't. And so really, it was really a page turner. Really, really was.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say this. It needs a disclaimer at the beginning of the book that says, read at your own risk of sleep Depravity.
Deprivation, right?
I'm telling you, yeah, deprivation. Thank you. Because it is, I agree with Dale, attention to detail, and someone like myself who is also someone very committed to details. I like the fact that there is a way, and I think of a tapestry, that you kept linking all the threads that kept pulling me through. But it wasn't as if other books I've read where it's like it's a tense tension. It was so subtle. And part of the sleep deprivation happened is because I kept wanting to get to the next thing, and your chapters flowed so smoothly, and the way you built your characters and so forth, that it was effortless. But I have to tell you, I lost a lot of sleep. But it was good to lose sleep, not because it was gory, as Alice said. The goriness was implied, but it was couched in such a way that the goriness didn't supersede the story.
Right.
Yeah,
If that's
Yes.
the way to explain
it wasn't disgusting. It wasn't disgusting goriness. It was done just enough that to leave it to your imagination to do the rest.
That is my favorite part of the book. It was the fact that the goriness was, to Robin's point, implied, but it wasn't so in your face that you had to decompress from everything that you read or you saw, that you lose focus of the story because you're trying to, for me, clear my brain. I listened to it in a 5-hour set and a 4-hour set. It was that good. It was that engaging.
Okay.
It was not engaging.
Well, the point is, there are, it's not about gratuitous violence or anything being gratuitous. It's, the genesis of the book came from an article that I read that I didn't know at the time, and I found out a lot of people don't know. It's not actually in the Bible, but it is widely discussed amongst biblical scholars, is that all of Jesus's disciples were brutally murdered. And so they were decapitated, hanged, crucified upside down, because some of them felt that they weren't worthy to die the same way that Jesus died. So they requested to be crucified upside down. They were torn limb from limb by horses, and they died. And it wasn't just the 12 apostles that we know.
Right.
It was the lesser and the greater. So we're talking about 30 deep that Jesus ran with. And they were all brutally murdered except for John,
Right.
who was put into a vat of boiling oil, somehow miraculously survived, and then was banished to the Greek island of Patmos, where he wrote the book of Revelations. So so I read that article just casually, just recreationally, and that planted a seed. It then took several months to sort of figure out what's the story. And one thing I after reading the article, I said, wow, it would be really cool to come up with a modern day serial killer who is killing his victims the same way that Jesus's disciples were killed. So when we talk about gratuitous violence, well, the Bible is very violent, you know what I mean? And so so everything was the killer was preaching a sermon with so again, that kept it grounded. The reason for the prologue, the first chapter being what it is, I have a short attention span. So I write for people like me. There are many books where people will say, oh, once you get past the first 100 pages, it's really good. Like, I'm not going to get past the first 100 pages.
Exactly.
It just ain't going to happen, So when I decided to start writing, I thought, I want to come out sprinting. And then the trick is how to maintain that sprint. And so right away, right out the gate, with the prologue, we come out, and then the question is, okay, how do we get there? Which I think, Robin, that was a great question. How do we get here? What got those guys here? But also, I think on another level, I think it challenges the reader to say, can he maintain this? Because
Right.
Okay, you got my attention.
Right.
And so there's a lot of, but the book, you all being people of faith, the book itself is not just what you see. The book is actually written in the vein of a biblical parable. That's why I love people like Dale, Robin, I love you guys as being thriller fans, but I also love people like Alice who's not a thriller fan.
Right.
Because it gives me an opportunity to pull people in because it's not your usual thriller. It's a spiritual quest,
right,
a thriller, and it's a love story. So we have these different things. So you might not, and many people have told me, hey, I don't normally like thrillers, but I love this because the style of writing, the love story, the spirituality of it all. And so there are a lot of religious metaphors in the book. And it's the type of book that is written for you to go back and pick out these, what we call cookies that we've planted, or Easter eggs, or, like you plant them throughout. Right. And so when you first read it, it has to function as a taunt, captivating thriller. It has to function on that level. But when you go a little deeper, and I'll give you guys a perfect example. When we get to the end, this is Quincy's spiritual journey. When we first meet him, we understand his trauma, just as we come to understand the trauma of Degler, the bad guy. We're talking, it's a story about trauma, and it's about how we deal with trauma. Quincy dealt with his trauma one way, his brother Liam dealt with it another way, and then we find out he dealt with it another way.
Right, exactly.
But a perfect example of the type of metaphor and the type of, when I say the Easter egg and the cookies that you plant in the book. When Quincy is at the end of the book and he is pretty much dying, he's being killed by Degler, and but if you notice, Degler is drowning him.
Yeah.
And there's a point where he just completely releases.
Yes.
He stops resisting. He surrenders. He's surrendering to God. He's surrendering to the thing that he's been fighting his entire life. He surrenders to faith, more importantly. So by the time Macklin comes and quote unquote saves him, he's already been saved.
Right.
So ironically, Degler, his enemy, baptized him.
Right.
Wow. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's
my work here is done.
But that's the beauty of this. That so often so many books are anti-religious. Look at the duplicity of these priests, of these pastors, and so and what I love is that you really cover both sides. The duplicity, the acquiring faith, right, the baptism and those things. I think you did that really, really well. It really was got you thinking. I love being forced to think. Right. And I think more of us need that, especially around religion.
Yeah. And again, but you, at the same time, I don't consider myself religious. I consider myself spiritual.
Right.
I've seen religion divide. I've seen what people do with religion. I believe, obviously I subscribe to a traditional Christian format of, I believe in Jesus, I believe in God, but I don't consider myself religious. But I love the spirituality of things. I love that we have free will to doubt God. Right. As opposed to, we're not a bunch of slaves that God said, this is what you're going to think. So we can question. And so to take these characters on their journey, even with someone like Elena, who is a believer.
Yes.
She has to rejigger, she has to recalibrate her faith, because she realizes she's been operating off of she's been operating off of an inheritance of faith. Faith is passed down when we're particularly in the Black community, and in many other communities, but we all grew up in a similar way. Mama made us go to church. So adults told us what we are supposed to believe, and we go. And I went through an interesting thing, because when I went to college, I then got to choose God. God wasn't sort of stuff down my throat. I got to choose as an adult, as you're trying to figure out everything at 18 years old, living in New York, everything that's going on. And then you somehow come back to this place that at first you, oh my God, I don't want to go to church. I don't want to go to church. Now you go, hey, you know, I volunteer to go to church. So Elena, who had this inherited faith, had to come out and individualize and self-define her faith. So that was her journey.
Right.
And if we look at even what the bird at the end represents, again, it's faith, but it's blind faith. It was, you don't have to see what happens to the bird. You just have to believe what's going to happen. And that's why I never showed what happened to the bird.
Happened. Right, exactly.
So again, so there are a lot of metaphors. This is not like the goal of this whole series is not to bang people over the head with religion. People have a choice. So if someone can read this thing and just go, wow, that was a great thriller. Wow, that was a great love story. Like that's it. And it works on that level. But for people of faith and people that believe, and also scholarly people, I wanted to give them these levels of depth that they can continue to dig down and go, oh, that's what that means. And I missed that the first time. Oh, I got it. Okay, now I know. So everything, there are lots of metaphors throughout this. And like I said, if you think of it as a parable, if you think of it as a short story from the Bible, and you have to, and then the last thing is sometimes you have to go through hell to find your hell, to find your heaven, and so
your peace.
That's exactly. So no one would volunteer to do this case. No one, like Quincy Fee, no one would volunteer, but Quincy was forced to do it. And in doing it, look at all the things that he discovered. He discovered love. He discovered a connection to God. He discovered, and so it's not just about the case. It's not just about the external case. It's also about the internal journey that the characters go through. So sorry.
Let me ask you, so how long did it take you? Because there's so many dimensions. You could have written just a thriller, but clearly a lot of thought has gone into this. How long did it take you to write this?
This one, the first one, took me 3.5, 4 months.
Really?
That's all?
But a lot of that ended up being some of it was ego, because once I started writing, then I was in this competition with myself, like I'm gonna, do this, and in the subsequent books, I was able to, I forced myself to take my time more. But with this one, it started coming out, and then I started getting really excited about how fast it was coming, and so after 3 months, I had a draft, and then you spend about another month and a half. Cleaning it up, going back, getting notes, implementing notes. So the first one, and also it's also based on what's going on in my career and in my life. This was a window where I was literally writing 8 hours a day. This was a window where I wasn't working.
You said you used a lot of metaphors. For me, as I was reading the book, I actually got to a point where I actually got a notebook out, because there were so many metaphors embedded within it. I created a grid. I actually typed it up this morning of all the different metaphors. And what anchored this book for me is because it all to me then relates back to that spiritual journey and who God is. Because as the characters went through different things, they had to figure out how to, religion gives you the language and the guardrails in order for you to understand and interpret who God is. And in interpreting who God is, you're really figuring out who you are, because the identities, right? So as I looked at it, I saw Elena shifting, and I saw Romero, and definitely Quincy, because first Quincy, I'm like, okay, who's Quincy? But yet he was I talked about that thread. He was a big part of the thread that stitched everything together. But what drew me in and connected me to who I am as a faith, but also who I am culturally and ethnically, is the fact that it's about family. That's essential to me.
Right.
And that this was about relationship. It was about brotherhood in so many ways. And at one point I had to stop, and I did call Alice, and I'm like, it's about all these brothers. And I had to start connecting. And what it came down to for me is, at the heart of all this, it's about relationships, fractured, intact, intentional, relationships that you're born into and those that you choose to be in. But the amount of times that you use the word pain, how did I miss that the first time? Yet in those moments, pain meant different things to different people. I pressed into the question about this pain, and people bring their pain and their desire for peace, because that's what Quincy was on that journey as well, is that when they looked at those that were the meaning makers, when the meaning makers cause you the pain,
right,
that shifts your whole identity, and it shifts your theology.
yes.
And so how do you do that? And then I understood, yeah, there's a deeper level of accountability, because the meaning makers cause the pain. And one of the characters I think it was Liam and Quincy had a conversation about impact.
Right.
When people cause pain, they change, I can't think, but the chalkboard that you were born to be, they change it.
Right.
And when you do it to a child, you change the whole trajectory of their life.
Right.
And then they spend their lives trying to figure out not who I am. You know, they're trying to figure that out, because who they were supposed to be, you snatched. It was a phenomenal balance to have so many people going through simultaneous journeys.
The other thing is that every single character was humanized.
Yes.
So even at the end, every single character, you talked about the pain. Yeah, everybody had pain. And again, the beauty of it is that you can see what you see in this. Like, you're identifying, Robin, the pain and other things. And so that I saw that really wasn't what really resonated with me, as much as everyone is a human struggling through life, you know? And so I looked at that as an opportunity. So I wrote a book on influence, that all that exists is influence, and we're products of our influence. And I love the way you used influence to really impact every single one of those characters, and how they responded to the influence in their life as part of the uniqueness. That's why I'm amazed you did it in such a short period of time, because you really, you know, outlined a lot about each of the characters.
Mhm.
And so you have a gift, man. You know, I thought you were, you know, acting was it, but yeah, I think your writing is really exceptional. And I really do.
Thank you. Well, I think that you know, when we talk about trauma, pain, the architecture of our spiritual foundation and how that's influenced, and it's influenced by parents, it's influenced by adults, it's influenced by clergy. And so you have to put Degler in the same category.
Yes, exactly.
And you have Degler, Liam, Quincy,
Mhm.
they're all in the same category to a degree. They were both traumatized through faith. They were both traumatized by, so, you know, and so how does that impact and how does that shape? Because I get a lot of people that are torn between rooting for Degler and because of he's humanized, and I by no means condone, you know, the things that he does, but I think even at some point, Fee, who's going through his journey, he says maybe Degler has it right. Maybe those that to whom much is given, much is expected, that those that like clergy have a higher responsibility. And so their failure is not just their failure. Their failure is bringing down entire congregations. Their failure is bringing down, like, it's more so it raises some interesting questions. Again, whether one agrees with it or not. And I write this book, I write in a way, I'm not telling anyone what to believe.
Right.
You have, like you said, you know, Robin comes through it, and a big takeaway for her was pain. Dale, your what you take away and what Alice takes away. That's what I think a good book should do. I'm not here to say you have to believe this, but I cannot tell you how many people are like, I felt really weird because I was rooting for the bad guy because they, understood him more.
Because you humanize everybody in this book. There was no good clergy and bad clergy. There was no good police officer and bad police officer. Everybody has to weigh right and wrong. Like in the part where they Fee gets kicked off, gets suspended,
Right.
and then Quincy follows suit. But the bigger picture was Macklin is dying.
Right.
Are we going to be complacent and do, because what we need to do to save this person's life is illegal? So it becomes, and it's the same thing, whether it's legal or you call it sin or what. Sometimes you come to crossroads where the what you're looking at you have to take a stand. Like if I can save your life and I have to commit this sin to save your life, I will commit the sin, save your life, and then ask for forgiveness. Right. And that's what I saw. There's nobody in this book that had clean hands. Everybody had soiled hands, and where the clergy's hands were soiled, what happened was they took so many people down with them.
That's the point. That's the point, is that some people take themselves down. So some people make a decision and it's just them. It's like a person, an alcoholic who gets drunk, gets behind the wheel of a car and takes out an entire family. Right. There's that drunk that drinks himself to death in the privacy of their own home. They take themselves down. Clergy is, I see very, similarly. And so you have these buoys, these things to hold on to. So the book is about brotherhood, as we talked about earlier, but there's a lot of metaphors to father. Right. Because so you look at Romero in some way represents God. Right. Because he loved his daughter so unconditionally, and he loved his grandson so unconditionally. And so her interpretation of her father, again, she has to go through hell to discover the heaven of his love. And so there is the absence of a father with Quincy and Liam. Yeah. How did the absence of a father, what did that do? And so we obviously know the relationship of Degler and his father. Right. We also, but again, we're talking about priests and we use the word father when we address them.
And so Fee and his father.
What's that?
And Fee and his father.
Yeah, his father. And the cool thing is in the second book is about Fee. And so each character has a strong point of view, each one of them. So Quincy, because he was an altar boy and the nature of the crime, this was his point of view, even though all three of them are, very heavy in the entire book. That's how the entire series is. The next book, Laws of Wrath, Fee's father, who, was a criminal, some of the stuff that he did in the past comes back to haunt him. And Fee has to, and so Fee goes on his quote unquote spiritual quest. So Quincy went on his spiritual quest in the first book. Fee goes on his spiritual quest in the second book. And then in the third book, we deal with anti-Semitism and hate crimes. And Macklin, who is part Jewish, will go on her journey. So that's how that's the construct and the series. So but they're all in, but we'll explore father-son relationships more in the second book because of how Fee idolizes his father. Mm-hmm. And so we get to explore that more. But I think it's also important, again, some of the metaphors. Elena loves the ocean. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the ocean represented purity, and it represented baptism, and we saw what it did with Quincy, but the presence of water and the presence of sunrise and sunset and the presence of the universe. And so there's an earthly spirituality, which is basically the celebration of the universe. And so having a connection, she has such a connection to the water. And look at what the water brought her. The water ultimately brought her love, because Quincy started meeting her at the park, at the water.
I love the love story.
Yeah.
And
I love
the
love
water was
story.
peace in some incidents. And I like the fact that the way you use the weather to help guide moments in the book, that, looks like a storm is coming. Well, the storm is definitely coming. And so I'm like, he's using the weather. And so, and that resonated with me, because my father is from the South. And one thing he taught me as a young person is how to read the sky. So even though the weather report tells you one thing,
right,
the sky will tell you what it actually is. So that again, and I picked up on that. I'm like, why is he talking about the what? Yeah, storm, is coming. And that was part of my metaphors on my list, was how you use the weather, how you use nature, and I thought to myself, how many people miss the importance of that crane?
Yeah.
It's just a bird in the park. No, that crane, I said, it was wonderful, because you know what? Though the evidence is that it's wounded, it's still, to me, it was a story of hope and resilience. And I got the point, right?
That's Quincy's fate. He's wounded.
Yes.
But as long as you keep showing up, as long as you keep trying to elevate yourself, which is flight, then you stand. And so again, we don't have to wait around to see if the crane takes flight. We believe, because for me, faith is believing in what happens when, like, a lot of times when someone does you wrong, we always say karma, karma, karma. Well, you don't always get to see what happens.
Right, the result.
But if you really truly believe, seeing it should be secondary. Sometimes we're not satisfied until we see this person done me wrong. Oh, and I ran into them and they look bad now. So we get a sense of relief from visually seeing it. But deep faith says, whether you see it or not,
right,
it is, you take that away. So a friend of mine gave me the note. She said, whenever I see a bird or something, I know at the end they're going to fly. I think when the first draft, I think the bird did take flight. And then when I send it out to a group of people that are very intelligent, and a friend of mine, she's an author who's amazing. She gives the most amazing notes. And so she said, the minute I saw the bird, I knew we were going to see it fly. And I said, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to rework it. Right. But it elevated my consciousness of that's what true faith is. Whether I see it or not, I still believe. And that's who Quincy was wounded.
Right.
Quincy was compromised. Quincy was left behind, as the bird was left behind. Quincy was left behind in love, in companionship, and he was left behind. And then going through this hellacious case, he caught up. He caught up with love. He caught up with belief. He caught up with himself. And then the one that we think is solid and
have it going on.
And you start realizing people have these things in them and they process trauma differently.
Right. Well, I want to go back to the weather. One of the things that I think, you use the weather the way they use music in movies. Right. And so I don't know if that was intentional, but I thought that was brilliant. That how when it's coming, the scary music comes, somebody's going to jump out. So, the fun music comes, and you kind of use the weather to really be that kind of preamble for what's going to happen. I thought that was brilliant.
And that's how we, when we bring Degler in, just when they think they're going to get him, he comes in the storm.
Right.
And the storm has started, and here comes Degler. And so in the midst of the storm, they can't quite tell who he is. And is he but they're sitting there and the line is, even before that, a storm is coming, and you're right. When it arrives, it is that metaphor that boy is a storm coming, and it's going to unleash a lot of terror. And so we use, so like I said, lots and lots of metaphors. But here's the beauty of the book, or as I see it. Some people, they don't have to get that.
Right.
They don't have to get the metaphor to enjoy a good ride, a good love story, they don't have to. So it operates. Now, I have a classical training in theater. So this is how we used to analyze Shakespeare, Chekhov, Ibsen, Tennessee Williams. We used to do these deep dives, and from a dramaturgical point of view, it was always discovering, like our instructor would say something, you go, oh my God, like Shakespeare, oh my, and then you start going, Shakespeare was deep, but you have to understand the history of Shakespeare. His plays were performed for the poor and the royalty at the same time. Right. So, and ironically, what we call the orchestra seats, that was for the groundlings, that was for the peasants. Royalty sat up in the balcony, but they were simultaneously, the intellects, the royals, the peasants, they were simultaneously looking at his plays the same night, the same. So each one took, it's like some of the ground, they got some of the bawdy humor, right, but they might not have gotten some of the deep, and vice versa. And sometimes they got it. And so, but the point is, his plays worked on both levels. And so that was, and I'm by no means comparing myself to Shakespeare, I'm simply saying that was an influence, because that was an early part of my training of how to approach text. And so I wanted to write that way, that, listen, you guys this is an amazing panel, and you guys have done your homework, and so I wrote the book for this moment. I wrote the book for you guys personally. I wrote the book for people that can go in and see things that a lot of people, that's the ultimate goal. But then I also write the book for, if someone wants to pick up sit on the beach and read a page turner and stay up at night and can't put it down, I'm writing for them as well. But these books are really written for this moment, and I thank you guys for the depth and for the opinions and for the detail in which you read it, because be like, hey, I caught this, like ultimately you want that, but it's not necessary for the success or the enjoyment of the book if you don't, because you're enjoying it for what you enjoy it for. But I love these discussions, basically, is what I'm saying.
Introduce you to your panel.
I have Reverend Robin Pinckney, who is focused on trauma-informed ministry. You have Dr. Dale Caldwell, the pastor of the Covenant United Methodist Church in Plainfield, New Jersey.
Only am I a reverend at a Baptist church. I went to Catholic school for a big portion of my education. I also have family that is split between American AME, so American Methodist Episcopal, and then the Baptist. So when I was reading this, you had me all over, and when I went through my ordination process, I informed my catechizers. I says, God has called me to trauma-informed ministry, that we have to know that there are people who have been traumatized in our midst, and every person has had a trauma.
Right.
And I could also relate to what was in the book, because I am also a survivor of trauma, of inappropriateness of people. So this was great that you knew that there was hope and resilience. But then from the perspective of clergy, is that often people elevate clergy to a godlike status. And the trouble is when clergy elevate themselves and believe they're pressed.
That's right.
But yet, here's the thing that is also anchored in your book, the significance of accountability.
Right.
And so to me, that resonated with, if you want to do the work that you're called to do, you have to have, some people call it a circle of accountability.
Right.
And it seems that those who lose their way in such a way that a lot of these priests and pastors did is because there's an absence of accountability. So I just want to let you know that it resonated with me, because anyone can pick up the book, because you've helped to humanize even the purpose and the role of clergy. And our function is to get people to faith, to God.
Let me build on that. So my great grandfather was the second bishop of the AME Church, Morris Brown. So, Morris Brown College. And so my dad knew and marched with Dr. King. And so I'm from 4 generations, and I was a certified layperson. But a year and a half ago, I became a licensed local pastor in the church. And as someone, and I come from consulting, and Alice knows a whole bunch of things, but as a fairly new pastor, and you look at religion, the thing that sticks out for me in the book is this thing called judgment. And one of the problems in religion is that so many folks don't realize God is the only judge. I can't judge somebody because of who they are. And this book was filled with everyone judging everybody else. That is at the heart of why people don't believe.
Right.
And so I think that if you said, well, what one word describes it, I would say judgment. And I think we as religious, so I was going to suggest, because many a book has sold real well by having discussion groups.
I describe what Elena went through differently than, I think she went from religion to faith. And I have a friend that wrote a book, says from religion to relationship. She had a religion. She grew up.
I like that. I like that.
Customs and religion. She didn't have faith. Right. That was never tried and tested. Right. So she didn't have faith until she had an experience that called upon her to have faith. And she didn't, nothing was right. It was, she never had faith. She had religion.
She had,
So she transitioned from a person that had religion and customs to a woman of faith, which is a totally different ball game altogether. So, and I saw it, and the part where Dale talks about judgment, I look at Fee when they had to go to his father for the weapons, and he couldn't look at his father. He was looking down because he held himself to a higher standard than the stuff that his father did. Now he's coming to his father to ask for his help from the underworld, and he was embarrassed, and he had judgment of his father. That's why he was judging himself for asking his father. And then when he finally looked at his father and recognized his father had no judgment back at him, I was like, dang, that's powerful. That was so powerful to me, that he had so much judgment that he couldn't look at him. And when he looked at his father knew that this wasn't coming from a seedy side of him. This was coming from desperation of being able to do something good,
Well, the thing about it is, there's again another metaphor, is that what are we willing to do to save family? And so Macklin, in a short period of time, Quincy and Fee have always been family. They've adopted each other, and ironically, they've adopted each other. Obviously, Fee, over his own brother, thinks of Quincy as his brother. Quincy's journey, and even more so even in the second book, you'll ultimately see that even as close as Quincy was to Liam, he and Fee are soulmates as far as brothers go. And so I think that kind of stuff is really really interesting, for me, and to have that. And so then Macklin is sort of adopted into this tight-knit family. And so they are willing to do anything to save family. And again, you could take it this way, without them even on, they're willing to do anything to save the church. the church that they form, the faith that they are for, and they haven't even identified it yet. They just simply know, I believe in you, you believe in me, I will do anything to protect you, you will do anything. I will get fired, I will quit, I will go to my father, who's an underworld figure and his right-hand man, I will get illegal weapons, I will, and then, but here, like, to me, even one of the softer moments is Brenda.
Brenda.
Brenda says, hey, I'm ride or die. And Quincy goes, what we're doing is illegal. And she goes, hey, but she says something really interesting. She goes, first of all, I'm ride or die with you. And she says, second of all, I would like to think if I was in danger, people would be willing to break the law and break rules for me. So she goes, say no more. And and again, it comes to this unconditional
Trust.
love and trust and respect. And that's what faith is. That's like this unconditional thing. And so those little layers, those little gems, they're just kind of embedded in the story, but though that becomes, again, a part of the journey. Elena, I love, and I'm going to definitely steal this and make myself sound more intelligent than I am. I love what you said, Alice, about Elena going from religion to faith. I love that because again, we have to test that. And, shortly after I wrote the book, I brought it to the pastor of the church that I was attending. And here's the irony. So I bring it to him because, again, I didn't want to offend you guys. I didn't want to alienate you guys. I wanted people that had spirituality, people that had strong religious beliefs. I wanted them to see things. I'm not condemning any particular religion. That's why I choose all religions. I had a publisher who turned me down because she was Catholic. She goes, I'm a Catholic. As a good Catholic, I could not, with a good consciousness, publish this book. And I'm not attacking Catholicism. I'm not attacking Lutheran. I'm simply saying that men are men, and men of the cloth are flawed, and this can happen, but it's not an attack on any specific religion. It's simply saying, one of my favorite lines is when Fee meets his father for lunch, and he says, by the way, do you know this guy, Pastor Higgins? And he goes, oh yeah, he used to be a pimp. He used to be, he says, and then his father goes, oh, Lutherans must be paying well, because he's all about the money. And so Lutherans, so I just love how sometimes even like strategically it's like, what faith do I want to lead? Oh, this one pays the most. And what is it? What type of the donations, the tithes? Prosperity. Yeah. Like, he would have really just make, and so it was like that, exploring that, but that line, oh, Lutherans must be paying well, because he knows the guy's a pimp. He knows the guy's a charlatan. He knows the guy. And that's what it is. So it's not about attacking any particular religion. It's about attacking the hypocrites that have been put into positions of leadership. And here's the irony. So I wrote the book, I gave it to certain people, I gave it to the pastor of the church that I was going to at the time. Mm-hmm. And he signed off on it. And that's when I knew, okay, we're good. That's not to say every pastor or every person of religion is going to, respond to it, but I felt good about it. And several months later, or maybe a year later, he was basically kicked out of the church for doing things that he wasn't supposed to be doing.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
So, which just makes my point, what I mean? And the thing about it, I think we all learn is in the book ultimately is having faith in the universe and having faith in God over having faith in man. That's the simple. Because look at Douglas' father. He thought he was serving God. Look at how abusive he was, but in the name of God. That's man. I mean, look at Liam ultimately. That's man. Look at all of these clergymen. They're like, one guy he can't keep his hands off little girls, and he looks like someone's grandfather, you know what I mean? And the devastation that they're doing. So again, these are men. So I definitely was turned off when my pastor was doing some bad things.
Right.
But ultimately, I believe more in God than I believe in man.
Yeah,
and so,
absolutely.
man, myself included, that's the whole point of the book. We're filled with flaws and frailties and weaknesses and temptation. We're filled with that. So why would I put everything I have in you? And then when you fall, I'm devastated. I'm like, he fell because he's a man. And I don't have to agree with it. And it's funny because a month or two out of the blue, this pastor reached out to me on Facebook, or my ex-pastor, and I decided not to respond. But it's just kind of like, you're a flawed man. I'm not judging you in the sense that go do you. I'm not here to, that's between you and God. What you decided to do is between you and God. And so when we talk about the book being filled with judgment, my thing is, I know there's certain energy and deceptive people. I don't mess with one in my life, but that's self-preservation. But you go do you. I hope maybe you made right with God, but you screwed over a lot of people at this church, a lot. So, but that was one of the tests that I had to do, because I always give a book to, I come from ER. We had what was called technical advisors that made us look like we knew what we were doing as when I ran Chicago PD, technical advisor, a cop who made all of the actors look like real cops. So when you write something, you have to give it to the expert. If I'm writing something about the church, at some point, I've got to let someone from the church read it to get their interpretation of it before I put it out in the world. Because you might read, oh, this never happened, this is inaccurate, this is this, and you can do research, but if you don't really come from that world, you need the input of experts. So I'm always proud and happy when it passes the litmus test of you guys who say, oh, I get it, and you know what I mean. And the same thing even with like Alice, of again not being a thriller reader. There's still the book still has to pass the test. Is it just a good, compelling story? And for people that's not as learned as you guys, spiritually, religiously, academically, that they can still enjoy it. But at the same time, you guys just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's, like I said before, that's who the book was ultimately written for.
In seminary, I took a class, theology and novels. I said, this would be a phenomenal book for seminaries to incorporate in curriculum, because it's creating a lot of discussion. So the seminary I went to was about social justice. That's their theme. This book would thrive, I think, in that sense, because it's about social justice.
Dale was about to say something.
Part of the challenge is the ego, exactly what you said. And so often you ask people, where do you go to church? Well, I go to Pastor Smith's church. No, you go to God's church, and God didn't create denominations. And even in the Methodist church, they don't do it as much anymore. But my dad had 14 different churches because they move them every 5 years, because it's about the congregation's relationship with God, not the pastor.
Right.
And as a new pastor, it's amazing, as Robin said earlier, how much they put you on a pedestal and said, no, I'm no different than you. Right. And they went, well, the pastor says this, the pastor says that. And so, I love the book to really say, hey, we're all imperfect human beings.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the main message. And also there's something redeemable about us, but it's all the basis of love. Mm-hmm. And I think like one of my favorite chapters, it's always been one of my favorite chapters, is Degler and Macklin. Mm-hmm. Because Degler is in love with Macklin. Mm-hmm. Macklin represents everything that he wished he had. And he's she was back in the day when she was pure. There was just this peace about her that he's always envied his life. So that's when we see him at the most gentle. And so that chapter with, ironically, he's about to kill her. Yeah, because I just feel like because he also knows, he says, you can't change who you are. Just like I had to kill my dog because my dog would always protect me and attack my father. You are who you are. You're going to always come after me. And so that's why he did it. But that moment, because to me, it's like the redeemable, and obviously Quincy was redeemable. Elena's love helped to redeem him. Romero's love helped to redeem her. So there's all of these things. And then, she had one great love, obviously Elena lost her son. And so that's why I wanted to focus on that in the little novella at the end.
Right.
Because that in itself and I also wanted to show the beginning of.
Yeah.
And again, here's another one. Degler was in love with Joaquin. He was in love with
Joaquin as a father, right?
As a father, because again, that boy represented that. So what we see is ultimately in the main book, we see that a woman like Macklin could have possibly, in her love, could have possibly redeemed.
Right.
Changed him. If he had a son like Joaquin, that could have. And so again, we go back to that father-son relationship. So even in the prequel, that relationship, but that's the power of love. And we have these little hints of it. We don't all get there. And that's part of the tragedy. Degler could never quite get there. His brother, who turns his life around, comes back, and we think his brother is guilty, but his brother is actually coming back because I need him to know that I love him unconditionally, no matter, and I know horrible things he's done, but I still want to be there for him because love will hopefully redeem him. And that's so we have failed love redemption, but we have attempts at it. We have success stories with it. Obviously, Quincy and Elena and Romero, they redeem each other. Quincy, Fee, Brenda redeems Fee. And in the next book, you'll see some cool relationship stuff there as well.
There's one point that is really the fight in religion is Old Testament versus New Testament.
Right.
And that is really the battle here, that the Old Testament of destruction, punishment, the New Testament of love. And and I can tell what pastors, there are a lot of Old Testament pastors, and I'm a New Testament pastor. It's about love. So Eriq, this is fantastic.
Hey,
Eriq, thank you so much for coming back. It was a phenomenal book. You converted me.
Don't forget to pick up a copy of Laws of Depravity by author Eriq LaSalle. And thank you for watching Read This. See you next time.